All right, so this week we are going to pick up with vaYigra chapter 16. We're on verse 21 this week. Where we left off last week, this living hairy goat, deer, and Hoskini and Seafraw both said that it had to be alive. Well, and it's going to be hard to send it off in the wilderness if it's dead. That'd be just dropping it off, not sending it off. But anyway, as I said before, the reason probably why they said that is probably because somebody in their time was saying otherwise. I don't think they were just saying something that obvious just to be saying it. At least I would hope not. I don't think they did, though. But I was mentioning that the truth is nobody knows what happened to the Harry's goat when it went out. No, it's a hairy goat, not Harry's goat. When they went out into the wilderness, God may have directed it to a poor family so that they could have some food. God may have kept it alive. Maybe it was, there was a girl goat in there for it to, it was the one for him. Who knows? We don't know. You just assume that it died because they're sending it out in a wilderness. Well, a wilderness, the word used, as I said last week, is the word for a place that's fit for feeding a flock. So this thing was going to a place where it was going to have plenty of food and water, but with plenty of food and water comes plenty of wild animals and wolves and other various animals that would eat a goat. So that's why they assume that's what happened. But truth is, we don't know. Anywho, let's get started. In a very literal, unbelievably literal translation into English, it would say basically, and lean Aharon, two hands hands his, got to be his hands, not just somebody else's, upon head the goat, the living, the one that's still alive, and confess upon him all guilt, children Yisrael. Wow. Talk about a gossip factory. Think about all what everybody had to go tell him all the stuff they did. And he got to remember that for thousands and probably that's not it. All rebellion them to all sin there, and give with them upon head the goat, and sent, because it is past tense, away in hand man timely the wilderness. And I kind of talked about some of this last week, but it probably make more sense this time. So it was samach. Yeah, there's a letter by that name. So it's to place or to lay something upon anything so that it may rest or to support it. So it's very similar to some other words that we have in Hebrew, but this would be like to lay a foundation and you build a house upon it. They'd also be like putting a post in the ground, and you know how you put the cement in, but you put the boards going up to keep it level for a while. So it's that same idea of supporting the post. So it's not necessarily that it has to be on something, but that it supports something. So the but it's of the idea the foundation is what supports the house sitting upon it. So stuff like that. It's probably what you would think. Nothing surprising there. And then of course it's Aharon. That's light bringer, which the name Lucas, uh, in Latin means light bringer. And for those who don't know, this is why I'm bringing this up. For those who don't know, Constantine, when he won his war, he began something that eventually became known as the church. They had no name for it. He was trying to set up a new religion. And honestly, I think that if you know your history, you almost have to be an idiot to think he was trying to set up the Catholic Church or Catholicism. He was basically trying to expand Mithra worship. That's who he worshiped. That was his religion. And he was trying to expand it. So he kept using the word Catholic. That is a Latin word. Catholic is a Latin word. And it means universal. So he was trying to make his religion universal. And in order to make his religion universal, they got rid of the feasts that belonged to God because he saw that as Jewish, because they were the only ones celebrating the feasts of God for the most part. You were either a Jew or converting to Judaism if you were doing something like that. And so, since he saw that as Jewish, it was, well, let's take a little bit from all of these different feasts that these other people have, like celebrating the sunrise on what they called Easter, or Eshtar is what they called it. We call it Easter these days, but Eshtar worship. And from that, that's a fertility thing. And from that, we get the eggs and the bunny rabbits and other nonsense, because it was all about fertility. So that's not Bible. But the word Easter's in the Bible. Well, but look at the Greek. It says Pesach. That sounds like a Hebrew word, doesn't it? uh, it was just transliterated. There's a difference between translation and transliteration. Translation is you're telling them what that word in some foreign language means. Like eretz, it can mean earth, it can mean land, it can mean dirt. It has a lot of meaning there. And that's translation. But if I want to teach you how to say eretz in English, I'm going to write E R E, and I might use a TZ, eretz, probably a TS, I don't know, because you hear an S sound. If you don't speak Hebrew from childhood, you're hearing me say an S sound, or I'm actually saying a Z sound. So maybe I use an S. But anyway, that helps you to come very close to saying that word, that Hebrew word, the way the Hebrews say it. That's transliteration. And when you read the Greek text, there are an awful lot of transliterated words. They come right out of the Hebrew, because they are Hebrew words that all they did was transliterate them so that you could understand them. Now, when Constantine won his war, and after a little bit, initially he tried to bring the Jews into his newfangled universal religion, and they refused. Well, that made him mad. And so when he got mad, he said, let's separate ourselves from these detestable, deplorable. I mean, he used some really bad words. Of course, they weren't English words, but that's what they mean. Crowd. And he ordered his followers, who ultimately created the Catholic religion and the church as we know it today, which is a spinoff from that religion, that all came from that. And in that, because he was mad at the Jews, he wanted the Jewish Bible, which they stole because they didn't have one for their new religion. Mithra didn't have a Bible. The worship of the sun and all that kind of stuff, there was no Bible, and they wanted one. So Jerome took the Jewish Bible, and he took the Jewish New Testament. They were very Jewish because they were written by Jews to Jews concerning matters of the Jewish religion. Then they perverted them to such a point that Jews don't even recognize that those were letters written by Jewish rabbis. But that's a sad thing. But it is what it is. So he took and changed the names of the people. Now, you could not change David. There were way too many people named David at the time. And you couldn't change, what was the other name? There's another one that was real popular. I'm not thinking of it off the top of my head. But they took Moshe, which sounded Hebrew, and turned it into Moses, right? It's not. Some of these, it's just the transliteration. The difference because like in that particular case, Moshe was a very popular name. Lots of people who were not Jewish had that name, just like today. And the change of that is the fact that Greek didn't have an SH sound. They still don't. So it became Mose and Moses ultimately, because you can't end a name in the a ending because that makes it feminine. So they put an S at the end. So that's just transliteration that causes some of it. But things like Lukos or Lucas, there's different ways it's pronounced, and it's the same word, it's the same name, but it pronounced differently depending on how it's used in a sentence. So no, that's not three different guys just because the name is spelled differently in the Greek. It's used differently in the sentence, so it is spelled differently. You'll notice that about when you read uh, Pilato, Pilatel, Pilatus. It's all the same person. Pontius Pilate. That's who they're. So, but you'll see these different spellings, not because it's different people, but because that's something that Hebrew and Greek used to do an awful lot. Nowadays, we just kind of stick with one way of pronunciation and we don't uh, veer off of that track. So, Lucas means light bringer, just like Aharon, which tells me and should tell everybody listening to me that this man they called Lucas was probably named Aharon. But when you're writing up your Bible, you don't want this new guy to be mixed up with the really famous Aharon. So it's easier just to call him Lucas or eventually Luke. I don't know why I thought I'd tell you that today, but I thought I would. So, but here's something interesting. It says Shete Yado. Now, you could have said the word for hand in plural and just left it at that, and that would have meant two hands. Because I don't know if I've ever talked to you about that. I think I have though. But in Hebrew, when you're using a number, if you just say the number in plural, it basically means two. So, but in this case, the word for two, shite, actually is in this sentence. So it's shite yado. So we wouldn't really say two hands. You can say two hands, that's fine, or maybe both hands. I'm not even sure how I translated it at this point. I don't remember, but I either said two hands or both hands. And then it says yadav. So it's two hands, his hands. Now you know what's going to happen now. Oh, well, you got to have two hands from somebody else, and then you got to have his two hands. No, that is not how biblical Hebrew worked. This is just identifying that both hands, his hands, that's how you'd probably say it. Al, which is on or upon, Rosh, up on the head, or his head, could be his head. Well, it doesn't say his head. Ha Sa'ir. So both of his hands upon the head of the hairy. So some hairy dude has to, no, the hairy. Remember, we're just saying hairy instead of hairy goat. That this word has become synonymous with the meaning of goat, and it does not mean goat at all. It just means hairy. But we've already established that it's a hairy goat. So they don't have to use the word for goat again. And generally in biblical Hebrew, they won't. So the two hands on the head of the goat, hahi, of the living goat. Well, they've already sacrificed the dead goat, so yeah, you probably don't want to put his two hands on that. Then it says vehit vada. You have that's the word for confession. It's of taking the hand and throwing it out, or to shake the hand, throwing it out, to wave, throwing it up, to worship. But if you're talking about it throwing out from the mouth, that's talking, that's confessing, speaking. So it would indicate out loud too. Alav, upon it. So he's going to speak over it or upon it. Over it really makes more sense here. Then it says, et kol avonot. Ooh. He's going to speak all of the guilt. Somebody's guilt. If you heard the earlier part, you know it's the Bnei Israel. You know it's the children of Israel. Well, guilt, they say perversity, depravity, an action of a crime, a sin. It's whatever. I'm just going to say this quickly. Sin can be boiled down to a single sentence, and it's the sentence that I think that every Jew should learn, a New Testament sentence that every Jew should learn to protect himself and herself. And every Christian should learn so that they would know something that they don't apparently know. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. It says that everyone who commits sin is in rebellion of the Torah. Because sin is Torah rebellion. So if the Torah says that you have to wear a fringe with a blue line in it and you're not doing that, you are committing a sin. It doesn't make any difference what the sages say. It doesn't make any difference if there's a temple or temple priest. There were none when that law was given, people. I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. There was neither at the time the law was given. And believe me, the moment that law was given, the people said, we will do and obey. From that moment on to all generations, that became law. So if you're hiding behind the nonsense of sages who didn't even speak the Hebrew language, didn't live in the land of the Jews, knew nothing of the customs, culture, and the history of the Jews, did not recognize simple Hebrew idioms, if you're listening to them, I'm not going to say anymore. So whatever you've done, if it says to wear the zitziot and you don't, that's zitzit in singular, zitziot in plural. If it says to do that and you don't, you are guilty. You have committed a crime. You have done perversely. You are depraved because it says depravity. No, you understand. It's you have you have accrued guilt upon yourself. And it doesn't make any difference what it is. If God said not to do it, and you're still eating pork and shrimp and other poop eating bottom dwellers, holy smokes, that was enough to get me to not ever want to try the stuff. Woo! They eat poop. And they eat even grosser stuff than that. But I won't say that on camera because, oh boy, is it gross. Anyway, so yeah, let's not do that. Let's not eat things we shouldn't eat. So whether it's you can't do this or you have to do that, if you're in violation of that, this is what he's going to confess. And so you're going to have to, get in the little confessional booth and no, that's not how that's not what's happening here. It's the guilt of the Bnei Yisrael. So let's just say it this way. It's not that he has to tell God that he has to confess over this goat. This goat would dry up and blow away before he got through telling all of the sins of the children of Israel. Think about it. That's not going to happen. That's not what it's saying. It's basically saying he's going to put his hands on this goat and admit, confess that all of the children of Israel have fallen short of their promise to God this year. And then it says, and all, it says at kol, and all pish ehem, all of their rebellion. So it's not that you just say, yeah, they're guilty. You're confessing that in some cases, maybe even most, they did it on purpose. That's what rebellion is. This is lechol, which is to all, chatotam. or for all. You can either two or four. You can say it either way because in Hebrew that doesn't change what it means. In English, maybe it does. So I'd probably use for their sin. So it's you're confessing the guilt that came upon that was caused by the rebellion of their Torah, of the Torah, their sin. That's what sin is. Plain and simple. Sin is Torah rebellion. So if it says do it and you don't, that's Torah rebellion. If it says don't do it and you do, that's Torah rebellion. Plain and simple. Okay. Then it says venatan, and that's to give, to put, to place, to set. You could say it's to put a foundation on, to put something on it. It's almost the same word. Oh, so we got two bullet points here. No, no. And no, we don't change subjects in the middle of a sentence. That's not something that's ever happened in the Hebrew Bible. They have never done it. So if your translation does something like that, something's wrong with your translation. They never did that. So anyway, in fact, the New Testament letters don't do it either. So Romans chapter 1 starts off talking about idol worship, at no time switched to being gay and how God hates it, and then ended up with idol worship. No, 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 that never happened. Everything written in chapter 1 is about idol worship. Idol worship. Just going to go out there and put myself on record saying that. I've translated it. I know what I'm talking about. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned, you guys don't have to agree. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I don't care what anybody believes, to tell you the truth. I care to the degree that I wish everybody knew, and it would help an awful lot of people. And the church wouldn't be in the sad state it's in right now if they hadn't gone around in the early days killing people for something like that. And in the late, and then in my growing up time, shaming people and making them that, they had to come out of the closet. They had to hide it. And that's why they called it coming out of the closet, when they would finally just move to San Francisco and say, "Phooey, I can live any way I want to." They should have been able to all along, because there is no place in the Bible where that's against God's law. No place. So it's not a sin. But anyway, I don't know why I'm on that today. It just came up. Anyway, so we have, this is of the setting and the place and all of that kind of stuff. So it's either that something is samak, supporting, setting, establishing, and then we get to the word natan, which means exactly the same thing. So in English, we do this. Remember, in English class, you were told not to use the same word twice in the same sentence. Where do you think that came from? I take everything back to the Hebrew. That's all I'm saying. This is what they do. It's not bullet points. These two words are not supposed to give us two different ideas. Every once in a while, they'll use the same word twice because uh, they'll say something like, "And his heart was broken, his heart and his soul devastated." Uh, they'll do that where they're using the same word, or a word that means something similar, to add emphasis. That's what that's supposed to do, is add the emphasis. And you see how that would do that. His heart was broken. Could have left it at that. But we want to really know that this was a deep brokenness. So you say his heart was broken. What did I say? His heart and his soul, to give that emphasis. We do the same thing in our language. Most languages do. So that's what you're looking at, is something along those lines. It's not two different things. Anyway, now in modern Hebrew, it could be different than that, but in biblical Hebrew, it will never be two different things. Anyway, so it says otam all, upon with them, upon rosh, that's the head, sa'ir, of the hairy, the shilach, and send it away. Like Shaliach, the sent ones. These days they're called apostles by Christians, but that's if you were sent somewhere. I mean, even the rabbim sometimes are sent somewhere. Uh, Maybe you send your children to the store. They've just turned 16. Well, they turned 16 a while back. You're starting to feel comfortable with their driving skills, and so you send them. You shilach. You send them somewhere. So this is the sending away. Then it's beyad, in the hand, or with the hand. In and with are the same thing in Hebrew. They may be different in English, but they are not different in Hebrew. Beyad, with the hand, ish, of man, iti, timely. It is from the word et, a fit or proper time and opportunity, quickly. It's used in those various different ways. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Ha midbara. So it's midbar is your root word there. Into the wilderness. Plain country fit for feeding flocks, not a desert or it's a pasture. It's of those things. Okay. So my translation is, and Aharon will lean both of his hands on the head of the living hairy goat and make confession over him of all the guilt of the children of Israel and all their rebellion and all their sin, and place them on the head of the hairy goat. What's the them? You probably know, right? The thing that he's giving confession of, the guilt, the rebellion, the sin. Place them on the head of the hairy goat and send it away timely into the hands of a man into the wilderness. I don't really like that translation. All right. Let's talk about a grammar rule here. Onkelos vaYigra by Drazina Wagner says the following. The first is the singular yado, which means hand. The second adds a yud, which is the Y sound, as the penultimate letter, which converts the noun into the plural. According to Google.com, if something is penultimate, I don't know how to say that, penultimate, it is the second to last position in a series. So the Y is the penultimate letter in the alphabet. It's the second to the last letter. In this case, the Hebrew word is be-yad, which places the yud, the Y sound, in the penultimate position and thus makes this word plural. Now remember, you're like, wait a minute, I'm thinking that's a bait, a B, a Y, A, and D. The A is in the middle. Now remember, this is Hebrew. We don't actually have vowels in our language. We have vowel sounds, but we don't have vowels. So the yod, the yud, is actually the second to the last letter. That's something that helps us to understand some things. Of the words and make confession, given that the Mishnah and Sifra, which also has the following confession, were written a long place and time away from the time when the Kohanim made such confession, it is dumb, as far as I'm concerned, to think that they could know what was actually said. Still, here's what they wrote. Mishnah Yoma 6:2 says, O God, your people, the entire house of Israel, have sinned. They have committed iniquity. They have transgressed against you. please, by your name, please forgive the sins, iniquities, and transgressions that your people, the entire house of Israel, have sinned, committed iniquity, and transgressed before you. And the people kneeled on the ground and responded, Blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom forever. Okay, well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. You could actually do it that way if you like, except it never said anything about the people participating in any of this. I mean, think about where the priest is when he does this and where the people are. Just going to let you think. I'm just going to let you percolate on that one for a while. All right, let's get to verse 22. And will bear the goat upon him, all guilt them to land, separate place, and send away the goat in wilderness. Okay, this may actually help us understand something that I haven't quite gotten back to yet. So it says venasa, and it will bear up. It's the word that's used when speaking of the ark. It says the waters nasa, they bore up the ark. They literally, as the water came in and got deeper and deeper, the water began to lift that ark, that boat, that really big boat, up off the ground. So it bore it up. It'd be like that image you see of I think it's Atlas, and he has the big world on his shoulders. You know, he's bearing the weight of the world. That sort of a thing. That sort of to lift it up. And we're talking about the goat doing this. Okay, let's move on past that word. Then it says ha-sa'ir, the hairy goat. In this case, it just says the hairy, but we know it's the hairy goat. Alav, so it will lift it up and bear it upon him being the goat. It's not being lifted up and carried away and bearing on the shoulders of the priest. It's of the goat, which you can see why people started calling it the scapegoat, except that meaning has morphed to something very different than what it meant at the time. Then it's et kol el eretz. So to all the land. That's the word. That's earth. It means orbis, if you will. It's the whole ball, the earth. Land, continent. What else? Country, ground, dirt. You know, it's used of all those things. Because remember, this is what's called a primitive language. It doesn't mean that it's old. Yes, it's old, but that's not what this primitive language means. In a primitive language, you have fewer words, and those fewer words have to have more meaning. The English language is not a primitive language. It is a very literal language. And so we have to have way more words to express an idea than what a primitive language needs to express that idea. So that's why in a translation from the biblical Hebrew into English, there's so many more words in English than there are in Hebrew. Because the Hebrew expresses so much with so little that in English we have to express the so much with so lot. With so much. Anyway, you get it. So then it's Gezerah. This is a separate place. It's used of they'll call it a naked land, which means that it's dirt. If your yard is more dirt than grass, you have a naked yard, right? Because it has no covering. And so you can get that idea from this, which is where wilderness the idea of midbar gets lost, because they're looking at this word, gezerah, and they're saying, well, this is a place devoid of plants, maybe devoid of trees, maybe they've all been cut down as how Jerusalem was described by I want to say Pliny. It's not him. Josephus. He said they had cut all the trees down, and at this point, well, not all of them, but all of the trees that they used for making crosses, and these things lined the roads. Everywhere you looked, there was just dead people rotting away on crosses, and they had to start reusing some of that lumber, which is why in the crucifixion story described of Yeshua, these people, not knowing what a cross looked like in that time, had no idea that it wasn't a big T, and they didn't stick a big T over his shoulder and have him drag it. That's not what it was. It was a post that just went across the top of his shoulders, and a very heavy one, a very used one, a very dirty, nasty one by now, because other corpses had rotted on this thing. So, yeah, it's nasty when you really know what it is. But anyway, they get this idea of this land that's eating up, but this is also the word for foreigner, a foreign land, a land not explored. So it doesn't actually necessarily, and it won't, because it's being connected to Midbar. It does not have the idea of a desert, as so many people have described it. It simply doesn't. It means some place other than a foreign place is a place other than here. Doesn't mean it's someplace you've never been, because think about it. They're in the wilderness, and they pick up their camp, they move somewhere else and set it down. It's not going to the same place every time. That's the problem that I have with their translation of scapegoat, because no, it's not the name of a place. Anyway, we've already spoken about that. So Veshilach, and send it away. Then we had, because we just had that word, et ha-sa'ir, so send away the goat, ba midbar, the wilderness. Kind of saying the same thing twice, isn't it? So my translation, and it, the goat, will lift up all their, that'd be the children of Israel, the Bnei Israel, it will lift up all of their guilt upon it, the goat, upon it, the being the goat, into an uninhabited land, and the hairy goat will be sent into the wilderness. That's that idea of nakedness is also of an uninhabited land. We know it's Midbar, so we know it's a wilderness, so it's an uninhabited wilderness. See, we think of this trek with the Yehudi, with the Yehudim, with the Jews, was in a desert. Really? How did they feed all those animals they left Egypt with? How did they cook their food? Did they all stand there with marshmallows to the pillar of fire? And no, they had to have lumber. They had to have wood. How do you think they built their houses? They did not leave with a tent. Who would have had a tent? It's why on Sukkot you're supposed to go out and grab stuff around out in the wilderness. Anyway, so I'm saying that it was probably a forest when they were there and a desert when they left. Just throwing that out there, just a possibility, just not trying to change anyone's mind, just food for thought. So, and it, the goat, will lift up all of the children of Israel, all of their guilt on him, the goat, into an uninhabited land, and the hairy goat will be sent into the wilderness. Well, I know somewhere in here I put my information. I want to get back to something. I'm afraid I'm going to forget it, but I'm positive I put it in here. So if I miss it this week, I'll throw it in next week. Anyway, so let's move on. Yeah, we got plenty of time. Let's move on to 23. Very literally in English. And come Aharon to tent appointed times, and strip off garments, the linen that put on when came he to the holy, and make rest them there. So he's going to leave them there. So, uah, that's the word bowl, but when you put the bait in front of it, and you're trying to say, well, it can still be go. This word can be go, it can be come, it can be enter, it can be exit, it can be went, it can be arrived. This same word. Because in Hebrew, it's not that it has all those different meanings. It just means, in this case, they all mean the same thing. Because if you went, you're going to come somewhere. You're going to arrive somewhere. And if you arrive, that means you left somewhere. You went from somewhere. So there's only one word for all of those ideas. And this is this word. So, and he will go, he will enter Aharon. I'm going to tell you who it is. El Ohel Moed. So he's going to enter the tent of appointed times, the tent of meetings. It's called a lot of different things. The tabernacle. Ufashat. He's going to do striptease. No, he's going to take his clothes off. This is really the idea of spreading out. It's like taking your clothes off and you fold them all up, and you got to spread them out so you can fold them all up real pretty, or you spread it out and put it on a hanger, which they didn't have in those days, or maybe you had it hanging on something, a peg in the wall. They may or may not have had those. I've never read either way, so I don't know. So there's something that Robert doesn't know. This is et big day, so it's his garments. That's what that word means. Begad, garments. Habad, the linen garments. Asher lavash, so that he put on. In other words, he's going to take off the clothes that he has right now in this moment after that goat has been sent away. Bevo, we're back to the same word we started, when he came in. So he's going to go back to the place where he put the clothes on in the first place, and he's going to go back in that place and take those same clothes off. And then it says, El HaKodesh, that's to the holy. Now remember, if it's HaKodesh, that's the area that's called the holy before you get by. It's the area that leads right up to the curtain. The Kodesh HaKadashim is the area behind the curtain. So he's going to go into that area, and he's going to take off his clothing, which he got in that area and put on in the first place. And now he's going to come back, and you get the idea that these clothes are not supposed to be kept anywhere else. You're not supposed to take them home. Then it says, Vehi Niham, and make them rest. In other words, leave them there. You lay them down. You hang them up. It doesn't make any difference. The idea here is not that the clothing is worn out and therefore it has to rest. It's not the idea that he's worn out and he has to rest, because we're talking about the clothing, not him. All right, I hope you guys get all that. So here's my translation. And Aharon will enter the Ohel Moed, the tent of appointed times, and strip off the linen garments that he put on when he entered the tabernacle, the Kodesh, the holy, and leave them there. It's that simple. The Babylonian Talmud in Yoma 32a says that verse 23 belongs chronologically after verse 25, since Aharon disrobed after he performed the burnt offering, not before, which happens in verse 25. So they're saying, oh, it's chronologically out of order. Oh my goodness, there's a mistake in the Bible. No, you do remember why it's out of order. I think we're probably going to talk about that after this next verse, but let me go on. Yeah, I have time. Verse 24, and wash flesh he, and waters in place holy, and clothed garment his, and he go out. Well, at least he doesn't have to go out naked. And made burnt offering he, and continual the people, and cover in after he, and because of the people. Well, it's not as confusing as it seems, but it says ve rachatz. That's take a bath. That's wash. So he's either going to wash the clothing or maybe himself. And in their day, they didn't exactly do it the way we do. They did not have a shower where you turn on the hot and cold and get just the right mix for you. No. When they washed, they generally just dunk themselves under the water. And if there was other, a little bit of dirt on them or whatever, they would rub on it with their hands. This was not a time when they had a nice little rag or a nice little sponge. If you're from California, boy, I took a beating over that. I grew up in California and I did not know what a wash rag was, because when I grew up, we had sponges, and they were generally sponges that my parents got right out of the ocean. I don't know how they cleaned them. They never seemed salty to me. But anyway, we had these things, and that's what we washed with. And as soon as the kids, that 6 months we went to Oklahoma, uh, boy, did I ever take a razzing over that. You wash with what? What are you, a girl? Yeah, stuff like that. Times were different back then. But anyway, that's when I was introduced to wash rags. I had honestly never seen one before. So anyway, this is to wash, and they did it different. Sometimes to wash was just to dip in the water, just to dip yourself in and come back out and dry off. Then it said, et besaro, dip his flesh. So now we know it's him and not the clothing. Dip his flesh. Va mayim, in the water, obviously. Bemakom, that's in the place. So where is he right now? It says kadosh. He's in the holy. So he's going to dip his flesh in the water. Now, does that mean he has to go into a mikvah? No, it does not. I say dip. The word dip is not in here, is it? I probably shouldn't say it that way. Let me look. I want to make sure I'm not saying. Yeah, wash. He's supposed to wash himself in water in the holy. So what does that mean? Does that mean he has to get in a mikvah? No. Does that mean he has to have a running water, a shower to get in? No. I mean, it does not mean he has to dip. So he's going to take that water with it. He can take it with his hands in a bowl, and he can dump it. He can get in a mikvah, which is basically a big bathtub. They had steps that you walked down into, and sometimes the steps came up on the other side, and other times it just had one step. You went down and you came back out the same way you went in. No rules about that. No reason why it had to be one way or the other. Just convenience all around the outside of the temple. They tended steps that you went down, you walked across, and walked back up a separate set. As you were coming from the outside deserty area, you would take your clothes off, hand it to the attendant, walk down inside, come back up, and I assume dry off somehow and put your clothing back on. Or maybe you put them on and got them wet. I don't know how they did things back then. But anyway, so he's going to have to wash himself in the holy place, inside what we would call the sanctuary nowadays. Then it says, ve lavash, and put on is really all that means. Begadav, put on his garments. Ve yatza, and that's to go out. It's used of, when you plant seeds and the little green thing pops out of the ground, that's the going forth. Or, so he's going to walk through the entrance. He's inside. He's going to go through which is now going for him to be an exit. The entrance of the tent is now, because he's inside, going to be an exit. So he's going to exit the temple, the tabernacle, I should say. And it says ve'asa, that's to make, to labor, to produce. It's to do, do, the word do, to do something. Very often, that's all I ever write, is just do. Then it says et olato. So I would probably say make. instead of do this time, because what's he doing? He's going to make the burnt offering. So this particular set of clothing that he puts on for this particular event, he takes them back off once the event is done, puts on regular clothing, and then makes a burnt offering, because you don't want to get any soot or blood or any of that stuff on the clothing that's set aside for this very holy event. Follow, he's going to change his clothes, is all it's really saying. It's nothing. Uh, but this is called the burnt offering of olat. It's the continual offering, what is laid on the altar, what is offered on the altar. Okay, then it says ha'am, the people, the people. It doesn't say at any point for the people, but it says the people. The chiper, and cover. Remember, that's the covering. It could be a roof. It could be this talit that I'm wearing right now. This kippah is a covering. My hair is a covering. So it's just the word for covering. Then it says ba'ado. And it's used being near something, but it's also used for us, we would say after. U ve'ad, which is the same word, literally. Ha'am. So I'm guessing idiom here. You starting to recognize them at this point? So our translation, and wash his flesh in water in the holy place, I've added place, uh, and put on his garments, and he will go out and make the burnt offering and the burnt offering for the people, and make a covering for himself and for the people. So that's what your idiom meant. Are we switching? All right. So I hope you caught that. Let's take a little look at that idiomatic phrase, if you will. Um, yeah, there's one more. Okay, so you're going to make the continual burnt offering. Then it says, the people, and cover uh, in after he, and because of the people. It's not exactly an idiom. It's just an idiomatically worded phrase. That means he will make the burnt offering for the people and make a covering for himself and the people. So it's a summation. That exact moment is not when this takes place. It is taking place over the period of several steps. He has to sacrifice the cow, that's the covering for himself, and then to sacrifice the lamb, that's the covering for the people. And so this is happening over a span of time. And since I've never done it, I have no idea how long it takes. I would think this would take all day, or at least half a day. I mean, this is going to take some time. So it's not this sentence or the one before, or the combination of the two, that it just now happened. No, it's over the period of however long it takes him to do all of this, that it's going to happen. Then I think this next part is real short, so I should have enough time. Very literally, verse 25 would say, and abundance the sin he smote the altar. So chelev, that's abundance. It's for the word fat, actually, because if you're a fat person, you're an abundant person. I have an abundant stomach. Anyway, ha-chatat, the abundance here in this case is sin. That's a word for sin. So it's there's an abundance of sin here. Well, yeah, you're covering the whole of the people, and not all of them are perfect like me. Most of them, no, I'm just kidding. Everybody has done a lot of stuff over the period of a year. So there's an abundance of sin being covered here. That's all it means. Yaktir, which is smoke. It's to give scent, to be fragrant, to offer odors, to burn incense, to make a sacrifice. There's going to be smoke because there's fire. You're cooking it's a barbecue pit. It really is. If we would just call a sacrifice a barbecue, people would be a lot less scared of our religion. I'm just throwing that out there. I have several times over the years, but that's what's happening. We're barbecuing food, and it's going to be eaten. That's the whole idea. We're not just burning stuff up and pretending some God is eating it. Come on now. So it says hamizbach. So that's a word for barbecue. And the smoke of the fat of the sin offering, or the smoke of the abundance of the sin that is offered, will go up from the altar. How was I saying that? Oh, I don't remember. Anyway, I have run out of time, so I'm going to come back to an idea that I thought I had in here. I think I have. I just think it's further down, and I don't want to say it twice. Anyway, I will try my best to remember to do that for next week. But let's go over here. Or not. Shalom, shalom, y'all.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh beyish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha vihunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and crush you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.